Hello again. So we are now in part 2 of the second part on the Inca. Today we are looking at one of the best preserved Incan sites. You want to call it a city, you're inclined to call it a city, and in a way it is, but I want you to think about this site through the framework of a royal court and a royal palace location on par with Versailles. We're looking at Ollantaytambo. And you can see from this image just a quick overview of what we're about to see. Ollantaytambo is located at the juxtaposition of two major rivers. It's a valley, it is a lush, well-watered region, great for growing provisions, and it has this spectacular potential, as you'll see in the slides coming up. We're in this location that's considered the sacred valley of the Inca. And as we looked at in a prior lecture, the Inca take pride in really landscaping, refining, and fine-tuning the natural terrain that they encounter. They make their mark on the land in these physical modes of terracing, of stone masonry. We'll see that in detail at this site. So what are we looking at right now? We're looking at an unmarked site plan. Over here on the left, at the top of this elaborately terraced hillside, moving up into the mountains, we have one of the most spectacular palace locations of the Inca. Even though it remained unfinished, what was being built is mind-blowing. Then across the river valley is what you can see, the river moving through this center right part of the site map. We have the city itself, and you instantly know that this is a human marking on this plan, on this map, because of the rectilinearity, because of that grid shape taking form. Not that humans always build in grids, but there isn't a lot that happens naturally in the landscape that is gridded. It's always a mark of human activity, human attempts to control, manipulate, and bring order to nature. So here we are at the top of that elaborately terraced structure. We are on one of the outer patios of the palace of Pachacuti, who we learned about last time and you've heard through some of the homework assignments. The Temple of Pachacuti was designed to oversee his court below. Everything that we see at Ollantaytambo that is original, that is Inca, was designed so that Pachacuti could be celebrated, worshipped, supported, entertained, all of the things that you find royalty wanting and doing, with his own court, who also relocated during particular times of the year to Ollantaytambo. You can begin to see where we're going today. We have this incredible stone masonry here on the right. You can see the precision. We're going to get into that more as we go. This bit up here is both unfinished and part of an attempt to show you what the structure was about to do. So don't count that against the Inca, the way that looks, which is very different from the rest of their stone masonry. And then although the image is fuzzy, you can start to see some of the important features over here. Up on this mountainside, there are a series of granaries, terraces that bring one up to that location, and also terraces for agricultural purposes. Look at this tiny little angle change down here, just to make sure they fit perfectly. And then, okay, following that same stone up and over, that stone ends, this one on the right ends, and so the one above it has to be made, has to be cut, so that it can reach and bridge this gap. Just the precision is incredible. And look stylistically at what's happening. The texture of the stone is not just flat, and it was, of course, made this way on purpose. It didn't come out of the mountainside with this nice pillowy exterior texture. It was carved. There was an ideal for this construction that the corners, all of the surfaces should meet with a slight rounded edge before they did so. Again, as we've seen again and again and again, incredible hierarchy, incredible planning made that happen. We know a bit about the Inca. You've listened to a great podcast that details how every Inca was put into service, right? Old to young, everyone had a task, they had a role, and whether they had a lot to give in property taxes per se, or they had a lot of energy and strength and they could be employed for infrastructure building, or they were young and were just learning how to use their limbs, or to the very, very old, everyone was given a job and a purpose. It's a very exacting state that creates a system that keeps every single person on the job, working around the clock, and serving its own purposes. Okay, let's talk about some of the work that was being done. Ollantaytambo is best known for its impressive terracing. And this terracing, unlike the terracing at Moray, this terracing was used to grow crops. And the Inca had a very advanced knowledge of microclimates. As we saw at Moray, that differential of 15 degrees that they could create from the bottom muyo to the topmost terrace, here that was employed specifically, we know, for crop growing. And just look at these terraces, they're amazing. Another infrastructural tool for not just raising crops, but for housing them are these granaries with natural ventilation up on the cliffside of Ollantaytambo. Here, through the use of these well-placed openings, windows in a sense, the cold and quite fierce winds that would blow through this area were directed through the granaries by their architecture, by their position, to keep that grain dry, because there's nothing more detrimental to grain storage than moisture. You get mold and deterioration and it's over. So these well-placed granaries helped ensure that everything stayed dry, everything stayed cool, and the storage was maximized for the agricultural crops that were being grown and cultivated. Now we're up in the granary, and you can see down to that city structure, the court structure of Ollantaytambo. The ascent to get to those granaries is so steep, and the winds after 4 o'clock are so foreboding that you can't go up there after that hour. So again, careful planning, careful thinking to achieve a particular end with the granary, and then of course the regulation of work schedules so that no one is going up there at the wrong time. All of this we see in just this architectural study. As we saw from the last image and from the very first plan that I showed you, Ollantaytambo is this exact grid. It is something we might call modern even in its precision and its layout. And that's hubris on our part, right? To think that only the modern people were creating gridded cities or gridded structures. We see them reaching all the way back here to the 1400s. The other thing we see here in the 1400s is these two sliced channels down this small stone paved street. And we also see that street is on a slight incline or decline, depending on which way you're going, but it's on a slope, right? You can guess what the purpose then is of this sectioned street. It's water drainage. It's funneling water out of the city, again, to prevent all the water-based diseases that the Inca didn't even know of. But it did help safeguard the population against things that Europe was at the very same time being ravaged by. Think about the plague in the 1400s, which was brought about by rats. But again, that inability, those unclean streets, created exposure for the people and really put the plague on overdrive. Or even cholera in the 19th century, so 400 years after what we're seeing here at Ollantaytambo in Peru, which was due to contaminated water. Here, the Inca are thinking about circulation. They're thinking about fresh water sources, all the things that you need for a healthy population. All right, let's look at the architecture itself. Take a second. Think about what we're looking at here. We are in fact looking at one of the Coricancha, which is the name for the city blocks with a very particular type of layout. So let's look at what we can see here first. We have one of those beautiful Incan stone walls with precise masonry. We also have gabled roofs made of thatch. It's going to be from something local from the area, and this would have been something that would be replaced periodically year after year. And then we can start to see that there's an arrangement within this Coricancha that is two-part. Let's look at that in plan so we can see it in more detail. So let's imagine we split this right here. We have a symmetric plan, one that could fold on top of itself, right? We also have a symmetric section, if we look at it in this bit above. So folding here or folding here, either way, we've got basically a mirror image on each side of these two concha. And you can guess what's inside, right? We have, as we've seen again and again in these early structures, we have a central courtyard, which could be used for gathering. It could be used for drying plants, crops, small batches of food. It could be used as a place for cooking. This open courtyard was multifunctional. And then we have places where different groups of people lived. We know that these are not the everyday people of the Inca. At this site in particular, it was the top of the top in terms of the social hierarchy. The Pachacuti's royal court was to travel with him at all times. So this would be, the highest generals within their army, the highest positions within that Incan stratification would come here with Pachacuti. And so these were considered quite lush, quite luxurious living spaces. And it is the 1400s, so that certainly is the case. Another thing that takes place at Ollantaytambo that we see in beautiful detail is again this question of hydraulics. Standing up atop one of the structures in the city, a structure designed to move fresh, clean water to the public, basically like a public fountain. We see this beautiful planned carving to direct water, and it's directing it down into this common spring or common well. So everyone from the city knew where to get fresh water. You walk down to this plaza, and there it is. There were other sites that served the same function, some smaller in this case, where this is probably about 3 feet high, but with no less care and precision. Now we're looking at a view from the top of that coming straight down into this beautiful rectangular fountain space. So not only the functionality of water moving and serving the people, but also, again, the importance of aesthetics, the importance of creating precision, creating the mark of the Inca on the land, on the people, on the water itself. This is an all-encompassing, almost maniacal, right, desire to show the power of the Inca, Sapa Inca, and their people. Okay, once again, take a little break, walk around, and join me back at part 3.